Let's start with the skin. We use the color burnt red to base coat the whole area to give the skin a good undertone. Brown rose is going to be our main color. With the red, I find it makes a perfect skin tone for someone who spends a lot of time working close to a fire. Sketch in your volume first. You can apply it thickly where your color is more concentrated, leaving just a little bit of red in the shadow areas. We don't need to blend it in, it will come later. I love using Berserker Bloodshade to paint beige skin. This color is a good match to red burnt. I barely put any shade on my brush so as not to have it pull in the recesses. Instead, I control my brush stroke to glaze over the part of the skin that is less exposed to the light, and push the shade towards the recess. This is one way to create an easy blending and let the shade do its work. Going back to brown rose. This time, you want to dilute the paint so it is translucent when trying it on your thumb. We will simply refine the blending by pushing the brush from the mid-tone towards the center. I mixed ivory with brown rose to create a highlight. By this point, you should already have decided where the focus of your light source is. Go apply this highlight where the skin would reflect light the brightest. Again, the brush stroke should be from the outside going to the focus point. See how the muscles in front have a large area of light, but the ones towards the back have only a fine line? This is where the skin is most exposed to the light. It is normal for the area in front to be larger than the one from the muscle in the back, which will have more shadow. Once you're done, you can come back with a highlight of ivory or even white if you wish for extra shine. For the leather apron, I was inspired by a reference picture I found online. I wanted it to look worn out. I started with dark brown over the black primer. Next, I used a mix of Japanese brown and light earth to dry brush the highlights and pick up the details. I used an old brush for this, one that will not only be good for dry brushing, but also stippling. This is perfect for a scratchy leather look. I will dry brush again, but this time with light earth only, focusing on where the light would be the brightest. I then layer highlights with the fine brush on the edges. I also glaze over the parts where the light is the strongest, towards the top of the model, and the more exposed part of the folds. Once I'm done with the general highlight of the volume, I use Pure Grim Deep Shade to accentuate the recesses' shadows. I stipple the shade to give it texture, just as I did for the scratches before. I go back to light earth to refine the edges that might have been obscured by the shade. I also retouch all the edges on the symbols. Since I was going a little bit fast, I might have made mistakes in the symbols and touched the inside with the light color. In this case, I go back with the final shade to fill them. Let's hop on the Crucible now. I have searched for a good reference picture of old cast iron pot, and this is the recipe I came up with. First, we start with burnt umber over the black primer. You can leave the recesses black to accentuate the final contrast. Next, with reddish gray and an old brush, I stipple a first layer of light. The reason why I don't make it even is to give the impression that this crucible has been used and not necessarily polished between each and every battle. I stippled in black stains, but also took the occasion to darken the dark areas a little bit more. All I had to do was to dampen my brush whilst it still held a little bit of paint and glaze where I wanted shadows. Going back to reddish gray, I edge highlight the Crucible. With Pure Grime Deep Shade, I darken all areas of shadow and inside the recesses. This was my first time working with rust liquid pigments. I stippled it around and was quite happy with the results. I finished up with a last shade of Black Knight Deep Shade. It is a diluted shade which is closer to a very dark gray. Very easy to control, as you would with a glaze. On to the painting of the fire. For this, you need to start with a white base, since fire is lighter at its center where the heat is the strongest. You might need more than one layer of white, but I also didn't mind leaving a bit of darker area on the coals. Just make sure that all the recesses are as white as they can be. With Ianden yellow contrast, I glaze over the white. I try not to let it pool in the recess, since, as I pointed out before, we want the recesses to be lighter. Just make sure to use your brush to absorb any pooling in the recesses. You want the yellow to be as even as it can be. With Gryph-hound orange, I glaze the tip of the flames away from the center and the heat of the flame. I also paint the reflection of the fire inside the crucible. You can add a little bit of orange also on the exterior of the volume of the flames, away from the recesses, where, for example, on the skin, you would have put lighter colors, you put darker colors. This will accentuate the effect of heat. With Amaranth Red, I dry brush the flame to make it more vibrant on its edges. I start towards the tip of the flames, and as there's less and less paint on my brush, I work my way down. Lastly, I dry brush with dark rust at the very end of the flames, so it would look slightly polluted. Now that the fire is done, I use a diluted Gryph-hound orange to glaze where the flames are reflected on the skin, gloves, and everything else within range of the fire's light.